Greetings, greetings, greetings. It is I, your king, Clifford Jefferson, descendant of Godfrey, the fifth Calaban Jew, son of Folk, ruler of Jerusalem. I am the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, which you know as Jesus Christ. I have descended down from time immemorial to reincarnate in this day and time to give you that which you are in dire need of. Here by my side, as always, I have Archbishop, Bishop of the English Church, better known as the English Church of England, the English Church of, pardon self, the Church of England, being reformed as the English Temple Church of England. Forgive me for that, trying to get a uniform and saying that. But he's always by my side to help me and assist me, showing his fealty to the English Temple Church of England, priorly known as the Church of England, going back from time immemorial. So I let him say a couple of words and we get on with this marvelous lesson. I digress.
Greetings, everyone, from the Kingdom of England. Empire Albion is I, Archbishop Belmont, from the Noble House of Belmont. And like the King said, it is always great to be up here next to his side, to be able to do this great, humble work to help get our people out of hell, which, is today as debt slaves. You got to get this information, brothers and sisters, if you really, truly want to come home. We're constantly, reiterating to you that ignorance of the law is no excuse. And ignorance of who you are, where you come from, is definitely no excuse. In the time right now, we need to know what happened and when was the time frame when the flip took place, when we lost our identity as English people. We were always connected to our English ancestors, customs, laws, traditions, going back to time immemorial, 1189. And something happened which required us to forget that. We can't tell you what it was because we don't know. We weren't there. All we do have at our disposal is the legislation. And you must find yourself within the legislation. You have the surname, you have the language. We've been presenting more than enough proof to you for you to just accept who you are. And if you don't want to be that, it is what it is. So I'll go ahead and let the King get started with this beautiful lesson. Once again, we're going to try to keep these things short because we know time is of the essence and we're dealing with a state of urgency, which the heirs need to hear this. So I digress, so we can go get started.
Well said, Archbishop from the House of Belmont. Once again, I humbly submit myself to my people, the English heirs and successors, who existed here from time immemorial. And as Archbishop said, I wasn't there. You know what I'm saying? The only thing I have at my disposal is what was created by my ancestors and preserved from time immemorial up into this day and time. And as he said, which is the legislation. And this is called, or which determines jurisdiction. People use the word or the term jurisdiction loosely when the word or the term jurisdiction means declared law. Jurisdiction means declared law. What law have you declared? We declared the English law. And the English law, there's only one law, and that's the law of chancery. Because within the law of chancery, it denotes to the king's consciousness in regards to cognizant law. And we know cognizant law is natural law. Natural law of the king concerning his subjects within his kingdom, which is within his empire. So once again, we did 6 lessons in regards to the origin of chancery, the origin of the courts of common pleas, the origin of the courts of exchequer, and the origin of the courts of exchequer chamber. And anything below the courts of exchequer chamber is hell, as defined by the Black law definition, as reiterated by Taj Tariq. There's a lot of platforms out there today that claim to present concrete information in regards to status and standing concerning our estates, but none produce such information as far as being able to reflect what's being told upon them and being able to examine that which is put before them. As you can see, as Archbishop so eloquently said, that we provide legislation. We know legislation is coded within statute, and the statute is supposed to be determined or deciphered in what we call the plain meaning rule or the literal rule, or what we call the golden rule. This is what the judiciary used to decide the interpretation of what we call statutory law. All right. So as we see in Article 10, as we're going to read, this is the July 2nd, 1776 Constitution for New Jersey. We know prior to it became the state of New Jersey, it was a colony of New Jersey within the province of New Jersey. These are key points that you must remember, because we know that the colonies, or the United Colonies, violated the original agreement, a charter for the heirs and successors by way of the grantor, i.e. the monarch, with the so-called obligee, which is the plantation owners who set up the colonies here in North America, who are known as the British colonies, now called the 13 British colonies, now called the American colonies, which you now call the United States. So it's very important to understand what we're saying. We try to break it down as smooth as possible. And it's not coming from us, it's coming from the preserved records of law. Okay, and we know what's lawful may not, what's legal may not always be what's lawful. So we come to show you the difference. Any other thing you want to say, Archbishop, before we get started?
Oh, and once again, to interject, like the King said, the legislation or the statutes, it's what we have at our disposal that what we must use to be able to make a claim. And for brothers and sisters out there who have been following us since we got started, we want you to please open your ears and make sure that your eyes are clear of what's being shown here. Because once again, we're serious about the law and we come here to uphold the law. We're not coming to change it. We come to uphold it.
Well said, Archbishop. Okay, let's get started. Article 10 of July 2nd, 1776 Constitution. It states that the captains, and as Archbishop said in our last podcast concerning listen to Taj, in order to get out of this hell that we're in, he clearly showed for the record that when there's an issue in regards to the citizens and concerning conflicts of their protected rights and rights that were infringed upon by the so-called local government, it usually results in an encounter what we call the police. And police are members of a police state, and police state is a form of society that's governed by a militia. All right. So as you can see in Article 10, it says that captains, it didn't say governors, it didn't say commissioners, it didn't say elected officials, it didn't say officers, it didn't say presidents, it didn't say senators, it didn't say what the other ones are, senators and what's the other opposite of that?
Commissioners.
Yeah, no, the senators and the lower become representatives.
Yeah,
Republicans. It didn't say that. It said the captains and all other inferior officers of the militia should be chosen by companies, corporations, partnerships, etc., and the respective counties, but field and general officers by the council and assembly. This is your state's government. All right. We're not even talking about the municipal government. Your municipal government or your local government is ran by the militia under the authority of captains who are inferior officers. Article 11, that the council and assembly shall have power to make the treat seal of this colony, which will be kept by the governor, which is called the commissioner, or in his absence by the vice president of the council, to be used by them as occasion may require, and it should be called the Great Seal of the Colony of New Jersey. All right, we're not talking about the state. 12, that the judges, remember Article 10 of this Constitution speaks about the inferior officers subject to the militia are governed by the captains. So now if you read in Article 12, it says that the judges of the Supreme Court should continue in office for 7 years. The judges of the inferior courts of common pleas and the several counties, justice of the peace, clerks of the Supreme Court, clerks of the inferior courts of common pleas and court of sessions, the attorney general and provincial secretary should continue in the office for 5 years, and the provincial treasurer should continue in the office for 1 year, and that they shall be severally appointed by the council and assembly and the manner aforesaid, and commissioned by the governor, or in his absence, the vice president of the council, provided always that the said officers severely to be capable of being reappointed at the end of the term severely before limited, and that any of the said officers shall be liable to be dismissed when a judge guilty or misbehavior by the council on the impeachment of the assembly. Okay, there you can see. So we showed you the difference between, as we said, the courts of chancery, the courts of equitable chamber or exchequer pleas, and the courts of common pleas. And any court that you have to plea in there is a court of common pleas. All right. Now, this is for the creation of those who are governed to the charter for the creation of the state colony of New Jersey. All right, which takes us to Article 22. It says that the common law of England, as well as much as the statute law, statute law is the common law because jurisdiction means law declared. And our law is the common law, i.e. statutory legislation, because opposite of that law is stare decisis, or what we call case law, which is opinion of judges outside of what we call the clear meaning rule and lieu of judicial review of the statute, called the plain meaning rule, literal rule, or the golden rule. Look it up yourself, brothers and sisters. Okay, Article 22, that the common law of England, as well as much of the statute law, as have been heretofore practiced in this colony. So they're saying before the colony was even there was always the common law of England, which was statutory in the particular territory. That's what that means, all right? It said in the practice in this colony shall still remain in force until they shall be altered by the future law of the legislature, such as parts only accepted, that as are repugnant to the rights and privileges contained in this charter. What charter? The July 2nd, 1776 Constitution that you're reading here. Mm-hmm. And the law of that charter of the state of the colony of New Jersey must be pursuant to the laws of the common law of England until altered by that legislator, but not repealed or dissolved. It didn't say nothing about repealed or dissolved. Okay, and that the estimable rights of a trial by jury should remain confirmed as part of the law of this colony without repeal forever. In a nutshell, all right, that takes us here to the encumbrance or the disclosure of the contract between the grantor on behalf of its heirs, successors, i.e. the English inhabitants here in what we now call North America, and the so-called colonies who set the plantation, which we went over in our last podcast concerning the Plantation Act and the Naturalization Act, and concerning the Anglican and Protestant churches who were trying to get away from the Roman Catholic Church, which was established by the House of Stuart under the Protestant religion, which goes back to the Church of Scotland, which was called the Kirk at the particular time, founded by John Knox, which goes back to the Kingdom of Scotland, which was founded by Kenneth MacAlpine the first, which was Germanic tribes who invaded England, as told by Flavius Josephus. He wrote the book. Tacitus. Tacitus wrote the book on Germania book about the Germans who invaded England by way of his uncle or father-in-law. His name was called Agricola. Agricola. Agricola.
Which means
look it up. All right. So here's the encumbrance or the disclosures in regards to the jurisdiction, declared law that's supposed to be abided by in the territory, which was called the colony at that particular time, for the colonists who were existing in that particular territory, known as the Protestants, the Anglicans, because all this particular territory was governed under the 1606 charter of the Kingdom of England by King James, who was from the Church of England, not from the Church of he was from the Church of Scotland, not from the Church of England, which we represent. All right. Which is the English Church, now called the English Temple Church of England. All right. Incorporated. All right. Incorporated in law. Corporation soul. All right. Provided always in its true intent of the meaning of this Congress, which is the Council and General Assembly, that if a reconciliation between Great Britain and these colonies shall take place, and the latter be taken under the protection of the government of the Crown of Great Britain or Britain, which the only way it can be done is by the Crown, and the Crown is represented by the King. All right. In order for you to have a crown, you must have a king, and the king is not governed by Parliament, but has enforced laws under the authority of Parliament to dictate the actions of his subjects as well as his officers under the jurisdiction of what we call the Courts of Common Pleas, the Courts of Exchequer under the Exchequer Chamber, and the Chancery Court headed by the King's Bench, which you're speaking to right now. All right? So it says, I don't know how I speak so eloquently, but I think there are answers for that. It says, provided always in the true intent of the establishment of the charter that we're talking about now, July 2nd, 1776. The intent of the meaning of that Congress is that if a reconciliation or a reaffirmation or a reconnection or a amending or an annulment of Great Britain in the colonies should take place and the latter should become under the protection of the government of the Crown of Great Britain, this charter, i.e. the one we're talking about right now for the state of New Jersey, prior to it was called a colony, should become null and void, otherwise remain firm and inviolable. So that means that when a reconciliation of Great Britain, which has been done, because why I am the king, under the authority of the crown, under the authority of Great Britain, what was called Great Britain, which we know as Albion, which was an empire. An empire. And the emperor of the empire was called King Edward the Peaceful, which I'm the reincarnation of. All right. And in those days, they were called giants. We're giants. All right. So it said, so there's a reconciliation, and the reconciliation was done by way of us acknowledging the state legislation of New Jersey called Title 16, Title 16.1, Section 28 of New Jersey by statute, which clearly states rights saved under the charge of Great Britain, saved from repeal. This is a 2022 statute of New Jersey, right, saved under the charges of Great Britain. What rights we talking about? The Magna Carta, because every colony rights are not founded or rooted in the Magna Carta. Why? Because they're rooted in the rights created under the House of Stewards under the Bill of Rights of 1689, which came through by the way of what we call the Settlement Act of 1701 for the establishment of colonies, now known as plantation, for other religions here and now what we call North American, which is descended down from the Roman Catholic Church by way of the establishment of the House of Stuart on behalf of the Elizabeth religious settlement established by the House of Tudors through the conquest of the War of the Roses under the houses that descended down from Henry Edward III with his son John Gaunt, which was the breaking of the agnatic succession to cognatic succession as a result of no true heirs. And when there's no true heirs, the estate automatically goes back into a state under the sovereign, which now is under the authority of the state, which we know is just violated. Why? Because by way of September 9th, September 20th, R2 said the legislature of New Jersey amended this Constitution of July 2nd, 1776 for our amended Constitution September 20, 1777 by substituting the words state and states for colony and colonies. That's a breach of law. Contract clause, Dartmouth versus College. Let's take a look at it real quick.
This is also another form and interject, that's also too another form of deception.
Deception. It's called a tort deceit. Trustees of Dartmouth, remember trustees or trust of the states that belong to the heirs and successors, which they were in charge of as trustees, was a landmark case in 1819, a decision concerning a United States corporate law from the United States concerning parts of we reiterated again. It says trustee of Dartmouth College versus Woodward was a landmark decision in United States corporate law from the United States Supreme Court dealing with the application of contract clause of the United States Constitution to private corporations. The case arose when the president of Dartmouth College was disposed by its trustees, leading to the New Jersey Hampshire legislature attempted to force colleges to become public institutions and thereby place the ability to appoint trustees in the hands of the governor of New Hampshire. The Supreme Court held the sanctity of the original charter of the college, who predated the creation of the states. Do y'all hear that? It predated the charter of the states because the creation of a state charter was a violation of the original charter, was established between the king and the colonies. All right. Anything you want to say to that, Archbishop?
And once again, the contract clause is the supreme law if you know how to see it. Because if they're showing you that the only way for them to be able to have power and operate, they had to go back to the charter that gave them their authority to exist. And as we see right here, those are those charters given by Great Britain.
And read the holdings of this case, Archbishop.
The holding, it says, the charter granted by the British Crown to the trustees of Dartmouth College in New Hampshire in the year 1769 is a contract within the meaning of that clause of the Constitution of the United States, Article 1, Section 10, which declares that no state shall make any law impairing the obligation of contracts. The charter was not dissolved by the Revolution.
Listen to what this is saying. Now, this is the United States, right? Article 1, Section 10 is from the United States Constitution, 1789. All right? Great Britain ain't even in the picture. All right? So the charter is not even being considered. Think about this. Look at the great treason that your founding fathers have committed. It says the charter granted by monarchs of the British Crown, not the English Crown. The British Crown gave it back because they know what they did was wrong and put it on the Americans who took on that debt. It said the charter is granted by the British Crown and the trustees of Dartmouth College. So the British Crown, when they passed it to the United States under the state legislation on their own, was ruled unconstitutional because they violated the sanctity of a contract between the original charters from under the trustees, which were protecting the estate on behalf of the grantor, i.e. the monarch, which were de facto monarchs at that.
Yep.
All right. And it said in their clause that they created to bind them, it says Article 1, Section 10 declared that no state shall make any law impairing the obligations of a contract concerning the colony and the king who allowed them to be here, which we see they committed in the amending of the Constitution of the 1777, September 20th, which just shows you that. I don't care how many times you turn your eye, you cannot run from this truth that we are who we say we are. Archbishop, any word you want to say to that?
And once again, like the king said before, we only come for our own because our own will see this for what it is and accept the responsibility that comes with them to stepping into their position as English heirs. Like the king said already, you can't run from this because you still deal with what? With fiat, debt notes. As long as you using that, you in hell. And the only way to get up out of here, you got to be the original heirs of the creditors who had gave life to those who owe us a heavy debt.
Heavy debt. Yes, sir. It's called national debt.
National debt.
Yes, sir. Okay. Now we're talking about a contract that was broken between the states and the United States. I mean, parts of the United States. Prior to that, they were called states and the colonies, because somehow a third party got in the picture. United States. So that means the land has been subjugated to the United States. And subjugation is against the law. That's called common recovery. The only way this can be pulled off is by artificial persons. Legal fictions. All right? This is why all ownership of land is very simple. Not allodial, because allodial deals with intel estate for heirs and successors. But under the states, there is no heirs and successors because the heirs and successors have been taken out of the picture because the contract has been disqualified and taken and ripped up. They ripped the contract up. And they don't have the authority to rip up the contract because that's a violation of Dartmouth College. It's what the state legislature did. They ripped up the original contract and made new contracts.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? On your behalf.
And brought you into that shit.
You agree to be American citizens.
Exactly.
We're going to show you. Look what happened. When they did this under United Colonies, he said United Colonies was the name of the Second Continental Congress for the emerging nation. Emerging nation. It wasn't even a nation yet. Emerging nation comprising of the 13 colonies. The British colonies, now known as the 13 colonies of America, which is now called the United States. In 1775 and 1776, we didn't declare your independence till July 2nd, 1776, by the Constitution we just read. All right? It said before the independence was declared, it emerged as a colloquial phrase to refer to the colonies as a whole. The precise origin is unknown, but John Adams used the phrase as the United Colonies as early as February 27, 1775, in his sixth letter entitled "The Inhabitants of the Colony of Massachusetts Bay." Not the state of Massachusetts, but the colony of Massachusetts. And when you go to the history of Massachusetts, Boston, you get into the history of the Revolutionary War. You get into the history of what we call the Glorious Revolution. You get into the history of what we call the English Civil War. You get into the history of what we call the War of the Three Kingdoms. You get into the history of what we call the War of the Bishop. You get into the history of what we call ship money. Got to know this. But look what happened. Look what John Adams, one of the founding fathers, is saying in the Boston Gazette. Read it from Archbishop.
It says, they have declared our cause their own, that they never will submit to precedent in any part of the United Colonies, by which Parliament may take away wharfs and other lawful estates, or demolish charters, for if they do, they have a moral certainty that in the course of a few years, every right of Americans will be taken away, and governors and councils holding at the will of a minister will be the only legislators in the colonies.
Okay, a minister is a clergy.
It's a clergy, yep.
Not an officer of the state. He's an officer of the clergy under ecclesiastical law, and this is what you call your Lord Chancellor. He's a bishop. Lord Chancellor, he's keeper of the King's conscience, and the only way he's active in his position is by the King's conscience come back. And the only way the conscience of the King can come back is by way of there being a king. And that must be by way of declaration. So Parliament has nothing to do with the King. The King is already a state that has already been here. Parliament that acts to the actions or the wishes of the King. All right. Now let's see under what we call the United Colony as told by John Adams, one of the founding fathers. Let's look at another founding father, Thomas Paine, of what he say about the origin of the charter that we stand on, called the Magna Carta. Calling on United Colonies to mobilize. Read what this says.
It said that Congress called on the colonies to rename themselves as states with new constitutions on March 14, 1775, as proposed by John Adams. The Congress resolved that it be recommended to the several assemblies, conventions, and committees or councils of safety of the United Colonies immediately to cause all persons to be disarmed within their respective colonies who are notoriously disaffected to the cause of America, or who have not associated and shall refuse to associate to defend by arms these United Colonies against the hostile attempts of the British fleets and armies.
Now listen what happened. This is how you get into the wars, because they're trying to deny you to fight on behalf of who you are as English people. So they disarmed you. They took away your weapons. They put you in prisons because they knew you knew who you were. Took away all your customs, traditions, laws, etc., and reestablished new ones for you as American citizens. All right, because they know if you find out who you are, then you can claim your estate back by going back to your representatives, by appointing representatives, because the power is in what, Archbishop?
Said the powers at 16:1-28.
Yes, sir. And that's the power of the people.
Of the people.
The people or the citizens of Great Britain. All right, saved under the charters to protect your inalienable and estimable rights.
Mm-hmm.
So it says here under the March 14, 1775 by John Adams that they're telling you that if you're not in cahoots with America in regard to dissolving the colonies to now become states, then you are going to be disarmed and you're forced to become American citizens.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go a little further.
It says,
hold on. Let's go right here. In preparation for independence.
Okay. All right, so in preparation for independence, Congress defined treason as levying war against the United Colonies, adhering to the king, or providing aid or comfort to the enemy. In early 1776, the cause of independence was widely promulgated in Thomas Paine Common Sense. He called on the 13 colonies to write a new constitution. Let their business be to frame a continental charter or Charter of the United Colonies, answering to what is called the Magna Carta of England, fixing the number and manner of choosing members of Congress, members of Assembly, with their date of sitting, and drawing the line of business and jurisdiction between them. Always remembering that our strength is continental, not provincial, securing freedom and property to all men, and above all things, the free exercise of religion, according to the dictates of conscience, with such other matter as is necessary for a charter to contain. Congress voted independence on July 2nd, 1776, and issued on July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence. In the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly published and declared that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved.
Now, key word, ought to be. The key word is ought to be. It didn't say you were, it says you ought to be. But that's not the original agreement according to the original contract. You can wish for something, that don't mean it's necessarily gonna come true.
Yeah, declaration, not a law.
Yes, sir. You can declare anything. That don't mean it's law. So with that, that will confine our time, and we'll meet you back here shortly for part 2 of the podcast dealing with common sense. Just plain common sense. See you in a minute. Peace.
Peace.